Another shooting, this time in Boulder, Colorado, less than a week after the shooting in Atlanta. Another day, another rampage. Is it ever going to end? And are we ever going to do anything about it? Let's talk about it. It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday night Rob Nelson live show, coming at you from our studios in Florida and Los Angeles, and to you on whatever platform you're streaming on, watching on. As always, like your interaction, your engagement. Before we dive in to the main topic tonight, I just want to address something that happened on our Monday night show, which has to do with your comments. Midway through the show, one of our regular diehard loyal listeners, Monkey Arms, said something to one of the other users, and our producer, Crafty, called him out and said, if you keep doing that, I'm going to ban you from the show. I want to, first of all, just apologize. You guys know my policy is nobody gets canceled for anything they say. Now, in reality, Monkey Arms, I'm going to show, you're there, I think, Monkey Arms. I want to show the comment you made, which was a joke. I get it. You weren't back and forth with one of our other listeners and said, oh, own what, Jimmy? Funny you used the word spade. He'd said, call a spade, and you said, you're racist. Now, I know you were joking. I didn't see the comment at the time, Monkey Arms. I saw it afterward. I know it was a joke. I want to be clear. I don't care if you weren't joking. You got a right to say what you want to say. And people said I was hypocritical. Listen, I take responsibility. It happened on my show. The fact that I didn't do it, afterward, I was pretty pissed off. It's my show, my responsibility, right? I talk about, like, be a leader, take responsibility. We screwed up. Nobody on this show, on this platform, should get canceled for saying anything. I don't care what you say to me, and what you say to others. I think the answer to speech you don't like is more speech. So Monkey Arms, an apology, and anybody else out there, I promise you, nobody's getting canceled or banned from my show, no matter what you say. All right, thanks again for watching. Let's get right into it. It's another week with another shooting, right? 2 mass shootings in a week in the U.S. And depending on how some numbers count it, CNN counts it as 7, right? Because it's whether they see 4 people or more dead or just 4 people or more wounded, But either way, 2 high-profile mass shootings in which a total of 18 people died. 8 in Atlanta, now 10 in Boulder, Colorado. Like the little sleepy liberal college town of Boulder, Colorado gets hit with a shooter in a grocery store, in a King Super grocery store. And people are like, I went to buy a Coke and I almost died. This is the Boulder police chief, just a few seconds of her talking, and you can see how emotional she is just responding to what just happened.
My heart goes out to the victims of this incident. And I'm grateful for the police officers that responded, and I am so sorry.
She's like heartbroken. She's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. She's actually saying, I'm so sorry also about, she refers to the police officer. The first police officer, first responder on the scene got killed in responding, just stepping right into the middle of it. And it's a painful thing. You watch it. Everybody always says, I never thought it would happen in our town, in our city, in our community. And the truth is, at this point, I'm like, why do people seem surprised? I mean, every time it happens, the town's like, we never thought it would happen here. It's like, I'll get to this at the end of the show because there are places this stuff happens all the time, every day. They just don't call them mass shootings. But why are people surprised? Like, it's going to happen, It's going to happen everywhere. It keeps happening. And again, the people are surprised it happened to us. It's like that thing, like, never thought it would happen to me. Guys, wake up. Gun violence in America is real. If you live in an inner city, it happens every single day. And increasingly, it happens all over this country. No community safe, no neighborhood, no walled, no amount of, goodness and shininess and money and anything will protect you from gun violence, because we have an epidemic, and it's a dangerous, violent, and mental health epidemic that's going on. I want to talk about the shooter. The shooter, Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, said, today we saw the face of evil. That was his first response. We saw the face of evil. I want to show you, this is person he's referring to as the face of evil. This is the shooter. He's got his medals on. Now, the question I have is two things here. One, there's a very different coverage that goes on because this shooter wasn't a white guy. He was a, thanks, Monkey Arms, I appreciate it. My apology stands. The guy who shot him was a Muslim. Who shot in Boulder was a Muslim. And the way the media and the public reacts is very, very different. But I want to point something out before I get into that. The face of evil. Was this guy the face of evil? Because, right, we're used to it when it's like when it's the racist, or in the case of Atlanta, the shooter who they said was a racist, even though the shooter said I was shooting people in the massage parlors because I have a sex addiction. Still, everyone said he's a racist, you know, and Trump's rhetoric led to it. And if you're on the right, or if you're a conservative, or if you're a bigot, and you do it, that gets so much attention that it's your racism. It's racism that's been proliferated in our society. People are encouraging it. Trump's gone, but Trump encouraged it. In this case, this guy was a Muslim, not a white guy. But beyond that, I want to show you a couple of his posts on Facebook. This was the face of evil. Take a look at these posts on his Facebook page. Okay, there he is talking about it's the Human Relief Foundation at Refugee Week. And there he is talking about how valuable refugees are to Britain. Okay, next one. Why refugees and immigrants are good for America. There's his post. Refugees and immigrants are a good thing for America. This guy's not a racist. He's all for it. He's against Islamic phobia and the whole deal. And his third one, just in case you were wondering, there are multiples. Trump's such a dick. The Trump approach to refugees. He has a WashingtonPost.com article there. Okay, so Ahmad al-Assasa, when you look at his Facebook, you wouldn't think he's the face of evil at all. He's none of those things that you think. He's not a white supremacist hater. He's a guy who's all for the most liberal of causes. He's all for immigration. He's all for refugees. He gets how Trump's a dick, as he puts it. He's all for positive change. He even posted about shootings and how bad the mass shooting in France was, like, against the shootings and this whole thing. And yet this guy walks into a grocery store and kills 10 people in Boulder, Colorado. The face of evil or the face of mental sickness? And why the double standard in how we cover these people? I don't care about it from a political point of view, you guys. I care about it because we're missing the point when we think it's about somebody's rhetoric led this person to become a racist, act out on their racism, and kill a bunch of people. You don't kill a bunch of people just because somebody said something racist or you even have a racist thought. You're sick in the head if you go in and shoot up a bunch of innocent people. For whatever reason, you are mentally sick. And by the way, it's a hate crime. I don't care if you did it because of race, because you have a sex addiction, or we don't know his motives in the Boulder shooting. It's an act, a massive act of hate. But the media still struggles with that. Facebook scrubbed the shooter in Boulder's Facebook account. Within an hour of it being announced who he was, they completely yanked his Facebook page down. Why? Why? Because they don't want people digging in, because it breaks the narrative. I'm sorry. It breaks the narrative of, like, they don't scrub the Facebook page of the shooter in Atlanta because you can see all his hateful things he might have said, or a sex addiction, or if the person is a true racist and goes in and shoots up a bunch of people because of their race. I've said I don't think that's what happened in the case of Atlanta, but certainly we've had racist shootings, mass shootings. They let you see what they said. Why did Facebook scrub his account, pull it down so people couldn't dig in and see that he didn't fit the profile? And it goes a step further. You know, Facebook hires third-party fact checkers, right? And one of those fact checkers, AFB, one of their fact checkers. So, right, Facebook empowers these companies to have fact checkers. They're literally the people. They have the ability, the authority to say, your post is off, we're deleting it, or your post gets a warning and your content can be throttled down 95%. This is the tweets or the post from one of AFB's fact checkers. I want to put this up for you to see. He says, he describes himself, journalist debunking misinformation, fake news for AFP Fact Check, which again, AFP Fact Check is a legitimate third-party fact checker for Facebook. And here's what he said about the Boulder shooting. A poor white guy highlighted white guy who may have had a bad day or just a sex addict killed at least 10 people in #Boulder. He's obviously making fun of the fact that that's what the cops said about the guy in Atlanta. He was only apprehended and not choked or shot to death because he was not brown, black, or a Muslim. And yes, he's only a shooter, not a terrorist. Okay. Well, he was a Muslim. And it's that narrative that I have a problem with. See, he was a white guy and he didn't get shot and killed because he wasn't black, brown, or a Muslim. Well, he was a Muslim. He wasn't a white guy. And he walked him out with a bullet, injury in his leg. So the notion that this is just all white people who are racist or all racistly motivated shootings, and B, that somehow the cops are nicer to the shooters if they're not black. It's just, we've gone off on this thing that's just not true. Otherwise they would have shot him because he was a darker skinned Muslim. But we're stuck on it. This narrative, this thing that divides us, we're really stuck on it. Like, we got to see it that way. And my point is, I'm glad that they don't make a big deal out of this guy's background. I'm not glad that they do about the others. The real motivation for these things, the real driver is hate, is mental illness. And we seem to miss the point about that, right? It's mental illness, and we want to look past it. I'm going to get to the issue of guns and gun control and legitimate gun control legislation, because people say guns don't kill people. People do. And I will say true, but people with guns kill people. But they're sick when they go and commit an act of mass murder. You're sick in the head. And why we can't recognize that it's a sickness, it's an illness, and it's hatred. And we have to sort of divide it up and politicize it. It's going to hurt us, and it does hurt us. So, and I'll come back to that at the end. Let's talk for a second, though, about what could come out of this. Because you know how many of these shootings happen and nothing changes? How many times we've had a mass shooting and it's like, okay, let's do something about it. Nobody does anything about it. Nobody does anything about it. Nothing changes. Nothing, literally. People say another shooting, finally we'll do something about it. I mean, someone said today, is Congress complicit in this? Both parties. I know I'm going to jump on the Republicans here in a second. But I mean, how have they not passed gun reform legislation yet to this day when the vast majority of the public wants to see it? Senator Chris Dodd from Connecticut said this. He said, "This is the moment to make our stand. This is the time." He said, the president has both parties of Congress ready to make reforms. And he said, no more, he said, let me read, I need my glasses sometimes. No more Newtons, no more Parklands, no more Boulders. Let's make a stand. What do you think? Going to happen? President Biden jumped on the bandwagon too. Here's what he had to say. Crafty, can we play?
I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future, and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. This is not and should not be a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It will save lives, American lives, and we have to act.
Okay. Well, aside from the fact that, I can't help myself, but I'm sorry, Biden just does not inspire me, guys. I know I want to be inspired by him, you guys on the left. I do. I want to be inspired by Biden. I know he's empathetic. I'm not knocking him for that, but literally, he's the most passionless, call to action. I mean, Trump maybe had no empathy, couldn't make the call to action about that kind of stuff. I listen to Biden and I'm like, God, sound like you're really in it. And I believe he is. I believe he means it, but he sounds like Grandpa Robot. And I'm sorry, it's not inspiring to me. And right now we need a leader who will inspire us. But this is the leader we have. I'd rather Kamala Harris got out there right now, took the microphone and said, Joe, stand aside. Let me wind you up out there. Because it's a valid point. Why has Congress not acted after all this time? And I want to get the gun debate is so stuck right now. It's either get rid of guns, guns are the problem, or don't touch my guns. And if you make any restrictions on gun rights, you're going to take away all guns. So both sides have a pretty extreme philosophy on it. And I know there's people in the middle who are like, no, we just want common sense, practical solutions. But in reality, the debate's pretty harshly divided, I mean, I've talked about, watching what happened with other school shootings as gun activists kind of hijacked them. And I even, talked to some kids as part of a festival. I was part of a film festival who'd made a documentary about school shootings. It was a really powerful short film, not a documentary. Sorry, it's a short scripted film. And when they were being asked afterward, the kids said, look, and they were diverse kids. They came from school that had dealt with shooting stuff. They were very aware of the problem, and they were very anti-gun violence. But they said, I don't think the adults in the room get it. They're like, we don't think the answer really is just about guns. It's something else. It's not that we want more guns in school, but we don't really think guns are necessarily what's causing the problem, because people in our communities get guns and shoot each other even when there's gun laws. And literally these national gun activists sitting on stage with these kids sat there, and I was moderating it. And I said, you hear what the kids are saying? And they're like, yeah, but they're wrong. They're wrong. This is the problem. And I'm like, you're telling the people who are telling you to listen to the problem as they see it in their schools, in their communities, that they're wrong when they're telling you we're not for more guns, but guns just aren't simply the answer. Let me take a quick comment. Apprehensive Fly 11, first-time viewer. Grover Cleveland. I am not sure, Apprehensive Fly 11, how Grover Cleveland could have taken care of this issue and dropped the ball on it. So in your next post up and tell me why Grover Cleveland is responsible, because I am intrigued. Grover Cleveland didn't do a lot of good things, so I'm wondering what he could have done here. And I mean it. I'd like to see your follow up on that and how Grover Cleveland did it or could have done it. So why can't we pass common sense gun solutions? And why are we stuck in this all or nothing debate? Because again, if you think about it, guys, take a second and really think about it. We get stuck in our heads. Guns are causing the problem. Guns are killing people. Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the United States and has one of the highest rates of gun violence. The notion that if you outlaw guns, Tyler, I'm interrupting myself. Time and place for guns. Open carry in grocery stores isn't one of them. Tyler, I don't disagree with you that there's a time and a place for guns. I'll get to that in a second. I'm for common sense gun reform. But my point is, we really are stuck in this divide. We think the gun is the problem. And, you can argue open carry in a grocery store isn't the place, but there are plenty of examples of people open carry in a grocery store who then were able to stop somebody from doing something. And again, mass shooters don't. My point with the mass shooters, it's not because you were allowed to have an open carry, gun in a grocery store that you became a mass shooter. You are sick in the head, full of hate and messed up that you go and get a weapon and try to kill a bunch of people with it. That does bring us to the point, though, of why not have common sense gun laws? Why is there resistance to expanded background checks? Why is there resistance to closing loopholes like the Charleston loophole? Why isn't it a requirement that the FBI reports to a state if someone's failed a background check? There are 2 bills right now in Congress that would allow for extended background checks. And nobody's going to convince me that there's a good reason why we shouldn't have more extensive background checks, the most thorough background checks, even holding periods. Again, this guy got a gun 6 days, before the shooting, but certainly having 24-hour wait periods on guns. So you can't go just commit an immediate act of anger or rage, because often the Gun Violence Act could be something you're just furious and angry and you do it, right? It's a stupid move. If you calm down, you wouldn't make it. Why don't we try having, assault weapons and semi-automatic restrictions and big cartridge, I can't even say it, cartridges that have, I'm going to sound like Joe Biden right now, high capacity cartridges. Now, I get the arguments against it. People are like, first of all, anybody can modify a cartridge. And it's true. If you know how to use guns, you can modify the cartridge. So it's not going to really stop you. In terms of semi-automatic weapons, a lot of weapons are semi-automatic that aren't AK-15s, Like a lot of shotguns are semi-automatics, anything that you can shoot more than one time, basically without having to pull the trigger. So, cock the gun. Well, fast setting, that's a good point. Gun laws generally do only apply to those who follow laws. And I think that's valid. I'm going to get to that in a minute, because I think the epidemic of gun violence goes way beyond the mass shootings. But it's a real issue, right? Something to really drill in on, because we get stuck in this, right? People, if you take away guns, only criminals will have guns. I think that's true, but there's something between taking away all guns and trying to limit the ability of people to walk in with high capacity weapons that can take out a lot of people in seconds. And the argument that we can't restrict that, to me, is ridiculous. I've heard it. It's one step and then they're going to take away all your guns. I just don't buy it, Oh, I get it. Okay, Apprehensive Fly is being facetious. Very good. Thank you. That's all right, apprehensive fly, because I'm going to get to what they didn't see back in the day. So just on the face of it, I think here's what Republicans are making a big mistake. Republicans are stuck. They're stuck in this thing that they don't want to give in to any of this. And I think they're stupid. I think it's stupid, and I think they miss the optics of it, and they miss the fact that people make decisions emotionally. And you can argue rationally all the numbers you want. It's an emotional decision when you see people getting shot up to go do something about it. Most of the public wants at least these basic reforms. Not making them, you're just going to cost yourselves the midterm elections. How about this? Why don't you make the law? Why don't you agree to them? Why don't you go, we'll do the basic things you want. Let's do it in a 5-year trial. We'll pass legislation that expires in 5 years to do the various things you want, ban the things you want. And let's see if it works. And if it does work, if numbers go down, well, then it worked. If it doesn't, you can go see it didn't work. There's nothing wrong with trying. What we're doing is not working. But here's the problem. Let's go before Grover Cleveland, right? The Second Amendment's at the core of this problem. And people argue about the Second Amendment. Second Amendment says they have a right to have a gun. Well, Second Amendment doesn't say I can't stop you from how you use that gun. Control it. We have limits on all our amendments. Okay, people are missing the point. Read the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment doesn't just say you have a right to have a gun. It says you have a right to have a gun and to form militias to basically take on the government. So you want to go pre-Grover Cleveland, go to the founding fathers. They would have been fine with assault weapons if they had them. They were fine with people having guns, not just to protect their home and their property, but to form militias to take on the federal government. That's how far they were okay with guns. So when people argue the Constitution doesn't give you a right to just have any kind of gun, I go the other way. The Constitution basically gives you a right to have guns and form militias. But I don't think that's the world we live in anymore. It's not the space we live in. Besides which, you could have all the guns in the world and you couldn't take on the government anymore. Back in the day, 250 years ago, you could have. Today, what are you going to do with a bunch of guns? You're going to take on drones and tanks? I mean, you can get a shot with all the guns you could have. So why don't we get honest and realize that we don't live in 1776 anymore and that times have changed? Thomas Jefferson said every generation, every single generation should revisit the Constitution and update it, have a constitutional convention. We haven't had one. Why don't we redo the Second Amendment? Why don't we have a new amendment that doesn't say you have a right to own guns and you can use them to form militias to take on the government? Why don't we say, I don't know, how about this for a Second Amendment? Every single state, let's go back to states' rights, can make its own decisions on the use of guns, on whether or not you can have or not have a gun. And you can choose which state you want to be in. Now, people go, well, that's not fair. I don't want that in my state. People on the right, gun owners going to be like, no, I don't want that. And by the way, I'm not anti-gun at all. Guns in my family, hunters in my family. I like guns. I shoot guns. I like guns. Never shot a person with it. I don't actually have one for personal protection. I've thought about it. And I understand the desire to have a gun. And I understand the desire not to want the government to step on it. But that doesn't mean we can't control it. And we should probably redo the Second Amendment and just shift gears. And you know what? If you don't like the idea that states could decide, well, then, you better not be in favor of having states decide, people who want to get rid of Roe versus Wade and basically say, let the states decide rules of abortion, including having no abortions. If you're for that, which a lot of people on the right are, then you should be for the same thing with guns. Let the states decide. Fundamentally, we're a states' rights country. Let the states decide how they want to handle guns. If you want guns, live in a state that has it. And let's see if you have more shootings in those states. Not sure you will. Okay. So here's where I'm ultimately really going with all this, though. And I do think we need the common sense gun solution. Yeah, well, any federal agent sniffing around Monkey Arms properties could have a problem. Monkey Arms, I'm guessing you're a gun owner, right? And I don't think guns are typically just a left-right issue. And I think a lot of people on the left do support gun ownership. But we are stuck in a vicious cycle. And again, it all comes back to the fact that we think it's about the guns. And I don't think it's about the guns. I think it's about our mental health and the state of our society and the epidemic of violence. It's not just about guns. I mean, cars kill people too, but we don't ban cars. Alcohol kills more people than anything. We don't ban alcohol. We do restrict it, though. So let's make common sense solutions, see if they work. Let's take those steps. But here's the deal. Chicago, no amount of gun laws will solve the problem in Chicago. Chicago has one of the worst gun violence rates in America. In Colorado, famous for all its mass shootings, you had 5 mass shootings in Colorado in 18 years, right? You had the Chuck E. Cheese one in Aurora, you had Columbine, then you had the STEM school shooting, you had the Aurora movie theater, Aurora had 2 of them, and now you have Boulder, right? A total of 47 people in 28 years killed in mass shootings in Colorado. 47, 28 years, mass shootings in Colorado. In the city of Chicago, 50 people were killed by gun violence this year in 3 months. Why isn't that getting the same kind of attention as each of these mass shooting gets? Every one of those deaths is just as painful, just as powerful, leaves people in the dirt. You know, in the US since 2020, there were a total, they estimated 500 deaths from mass shootings. I don't know if that number's accurate or not, but that's a number that's been put out there. But either way, there were 759 in Chicago alone, not from mass shootings. We make it about mass shootings versus individual shootings versus real specific gun violence that's everywhere and the epidemic of gun violence. And this all comes back to a very personal story for me that happened in the last few days. So I want to share this with you guys. So I'm in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville has its own history of race and violence. And in most inner city and impoverished communities, you have a vicious cycle of violence. So I've had a guy on my show, a former cop who does, who's out there doing, teaches diversity training. He's Black. And his son, Desi, was killed 5 years ago in a gang-related shooting. It's not technically a gang. It's called Cut Circle, but they're like, some cities have these groups that have formed, and they're like built around music, and it's a complex thing. It's essentially a gang. They control territories. They don't literally call themselves a gang, but they act very much like a gang. And it's a vicious cycle of drug dealing, of gun violence, of people shooting people from the other group. And his son got caught in the crossfires of that no one would have known or paid much attention. But one of the kids in that group, who Desi, the kid who died, was like a big brother to, is a guy named Lil Papa, who, I don't know if you follow rap, but Lil Papa is an up-and-coming rap star. Just signed a couple years ago, signed an $8 million deal with Interscope. You know, his last song came out, 6 million views on YouTube. And Lil Papa wrote a song called Letter to Desi. And it's about this. It's about, these guys rap about what really happens in their community and about the vicious cycle. And I cut together just like 25 seconds of it, just to give you a sense, and try to listen to what he's saying.
Bruh, I ain't talked to you in a minute. A lot of things done changed down here. Niggas ain't the same around here. And plus half of the team been in the chain gang since last year. Bruh, I forgot to tell you Kurt was locked up. He been in there for a minute, yeah, I know it's messed up. Since you been gone, it all turned for the worst. And it really hurts seeing you get put in that dirt. You say I love you, little bro, I say I love you too. Whoever thought months later they'll come get you. You was too sharp, bro, how you let a nigga take you? You damn like, why you ain't have your protection? And why you left a nigga down here stressing? The Lord finna bless me. Why you couldn't be here for this blessing? Why you can't get spared and just take it as a lesson? God dang.
There is so much in that I recommend you go find the video on YouTube. It's called Letter to Desi. Listen to it. Listen to the words. I mean, he talks about, how did you let this get you? I thought you were smarter than that. How come you couldn't be there? How come you had to go? Why couldn't this be a lesson for us? Why did you have to die? How many, do you think every single person who's a victim of gun violence, who's got a family member, I mean, who's lost someone to gun violence in a mass shooting, is thinking that, or in any kind of shooting? That's what people are feel, no matter where they're from. We focus on it when it happens in spas in Atlanta, or when it happens in a grocery store in Boulder, or a school somewhere. But it's happening every single day in these communities, you guys. And Monkey Arms posted a thing that in Chicago, it's gang related, socioeconomic turf issue. Think back to property disputes in the Wild West. I actually totally agree with that. It is, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be addressing it. Because if we really care about gun violence, then we can't just focus on the mass shootings and care about those. Because the numbers of people who die in those is actually much smaller than the number of people dying every day in gun violence in most of our big cities. And if you think the answer is just to get rid of those guns, they're not killing each other with AK-15s. And you can ban all the guns in the world like they do in Chicago. They're going to have guns in the street. So if you really want to deal with gun violence, if that's what you really think is important, go ahead and pass these legislation. Go ahead and pass the short term, the the marginal reforms, more background checks, banning high capacity magazines, assault weapons, semi-automatic even. Go ahead and make those modifications, pass them. It's not going to solve the problem. And you can't ban all guns. And even if you did, it wouldn't matter. So if you really do, guys, care about gun violence, then listen to what I'm saying here. Then let's focus on where the gun violence is the worst, because that epidemic of violence is going on in our cities every single day, 10 times more than these mass shootings. Those are all real people losing their lives, dying, leaving behind family members, friends, younger brothers, older siblings, mothers, fathers, kids. And the solution to that isn't in gun laws. It's just not. It is in recognizing that we have a socioeconomic problem and that we have an epidemic of violence and that we have a mental health epidemic. And we're not facing any of those things with the massive resources this country could bring in terms of infusing capital, money, mental health resources, and getting our eyes to focus on lifting the people who are most at risk up. So if you care about gun violence, if you want to make that difference, yes, every single one of those victims in Boulder, every single one of those victims in Atlanta, my heart goes out to them and their families. But my heart goes out to the Desis and the hundreds and hundreds of Desis that nobody's paying attention to. So you care about gun violence? Let's start there. I'm Rob Nelson. Thanks for watching.